What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another review, and this time we're taking a look at In the Tall Grass, based on the novella co-written by Stephen King and his son Joe Hill. This movie is written and directed by Vincenzo Natali and was distributed by Netflix. Okay, let's waste no time. Let's get right into it. Overall, I thought In the Tall Grass was just a weird supernatural horror movie. The overall premise of this movie is as this. This brother and sister are driving down the road. They hear a child screaming who's lost inside the tall grass fields. They go in, they get lost, and they slowly start to realize that they're caught in a time loop. So yeah, that's the overall premise of this movie. It's basically a horror version of Groundhog Day, though not as interesting or as cool as Groundhog Day. The premise of this movie is cool. The idea of a horror version of Groundhog Day is cool. But as this movie really starts to progress, and when you get to the second half, to me, that's where it just completely starts to go off the rails and fall apart and just become confusing. It becomes confusing. It becomes just cartoony in a lot of ways. It just goes all over the place. And an interesting concept is just overall just ruined by something that just because it works in literature doesn't mean it's going to translate to film. Or if the idea was more fully fleshed out, or if certain things were changed, it could have been a whole lot better than what it really was. Now, I've never read the original novella. I didn't even know this thing even existed until I was just watching it, until I was just looking up Stephen King movies on Netflix, and this thing popped up. So I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to take this thing and give this a watch. I'll say this. This movie is not without some positives, because it does have some positives. Like, the overall cast, for the most part, is solid. Majority of the characters are likable to an extent, like the character of Becky. She's a likable character. Her brother Cal, he starts off as likable, and then as the movie progresses, it just gets really, really weird in the direction they took his character, where it's implied that he wants to bang him, that he has incestuous feelings for his sister, which is just no in my book. I don't know. That's a no. You get the character of Travis, who was Becky's boyfriend and father of her unborn child. You know, he's sort of okay. No, he's not bad. You got Patrick Wilson, who plays the character of Ross. You have the little boy who plays his son Toby. Patrick Wilson, you know, he's fine in the movie, and then once you get to the latter half, his entire character turns into a cartoon villain. And it clashes, and it starts to really clash with the tone of this movie. For the first two acts of this movie takes itself relatively serious, has a very serious tone. Then once Patrick Wilson's character of Ross has the switch, it goes into borderline, cartoon villainy. The dialogue starts to become way too over the top. His performance starts to just become so campy and hammy, you can't help but laugh at him because he's just going all over the place. His performance starts off as solid and then just degrades into just cartoon land, and it really starts to clash with the rest of the movie, which itself starts to become cartoon land. Then you start getting these grass creatures and human sacrifices and this big giant rock that's never fully fleshed out what's supposed to be, but allegedly this rock is what's causing the time loop because of a human sacrifice and some nonsense like that. That's where this movie and the story just starts to really fall apart. If it would have just been kept basic and just stuck with the original premise, which is a horror version of Groundhog Day, and these people have to learn from their mistakes in order to get out of the tall grass, I think this movie would have benefited more greatly from it, and you could have got a lot out of it. What would happen if you had a horror movie version of Groundhog Day, and you have characters who are making decisions that they have to pretty much fix and grow as people? Becky wants to give away her unborn child because she feels she ain't ready to be a parent, and she also feels that her man Travis is not ready to be a parent. Travis who's the cause of Becky wanting to find a foster family, because he himself does not want the responsibility of having a kid. And you have Cal, Becky's brother, who, maybe has way too many feelings for his sister, and his whole character arc should be like, hey, this is kind of wrong for me to be feeling these things. I should try and help Travis, convince him that he should look after his sister and blah blah blah. and you have the character of Ross. I mean, if you want to keep the whole concept of The Rock and The Rock just toying with your mind, okay, that's cool. Meaning that could, I mean, you can have through Ross's family, he can like, fight the urges of what The Rock is showing him, and he can go back to being the better man that he's supposed to be. I mean, that's what I would have done with the story instead of going into the direction of whatever this movie was trying to do, which is just complete, just utter nonsensical bonkerness, stupidity. Well, like I said, at least the acting in this movie is fine. Vincenzo Natali as a director, this movie does have good visuals. It's a beautiful looking movie. It does have some cool shots here and there. For the most part, the atmosphere is very suspenseful, especially in like the first, 40 minutes before everything falls off the rails. Like, it does have some good suspense peppered all throughout. They make great use of the tall grass and making it look foreboding and eerie and creepy, which is not bad. It's pretty cool. It's a good concept. But like I said, it's this movie's overall story, once it gets to the second half, is what makes it fall off a cliff completely. If I were to compare this to Children of the Corn, I would say Children of the Corn is a much better movie, mainly because it has a straightforward narrative, and it's at least building to something. In the tall grass, it's building to something, but it's overall extremely underwhelming. And yeah, that's really all I got to say. This movie overall is just underwhelming, though it does have the concept. Though I'll say this, I think In the Tall Grass's ending works better than Children of the Corn, because at least the ending of this movie, you do have the characters facing some sort of redemption when Tobin, this big fight scene happens. And the fight choreography between Travis and Ross is just completely just bad. Like, it's really horribly directed, horribly done. You can tell these guys were just they were like play fighting. It was horrible. But the whole notion is this: after that fight happens, Travis touches the rock and he's given a vision of how to get out. He pretty much convinces Tobin to not let his girlfriend and her brother make the mistake of coming into the fields. So Tobin does exactly that. He convinces Becky. It goes back. So basically, the ending of the movie goes back to the beginning of the movie. Only this time, current Tobin tells Becky and Cal don't go into the fields, which they eventually don't, thus breaking the loop. Okay, that's cool. That plays into the whole concept of the whole thing being a time loop and fixing your mistakes. I like it. I just think leading up to that was just a mess, in my opinion. Just leading up to that moment was a mess, especially when you get to the third act, which is what every movie clings on. The first two acts of a movie are either going to be bad or going to be good, but it's the third act that can either save your movie or drown your movie. And to me, the third act, very mixed bag, very, very mixed bag, which creates for a very mixed bag of a movie. Now, I will not say this is the worst thing I've ever seen, because it's not. It is decent for the most part. It can be boring in some areas. The pacing can drag on. And again, when you get to the third act, it goes into full-blown cartoony mode, but then it attempts to save itself in a half-assed way when you get to the overall climax. So with all that being said, I'm going to give In the Tall Grass I'm going to give it a solid 5 out of 10. It's not bad. If you want to watch it just to watch it, then go right ahead. Honestly, truthfully, you can skip it and you ain't missing much. So yeah, 5 out of 10 for In the Tall Grass. Let me know your thoughts in the comment sections down below. Like the video and subscribe, and I will check it back next time for more.